I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation is the newest twist in the case of the accused Gilgo Beach, Long Island serial killer. An arrest of a second suspect connected to two of the bodies. Here's the story. Along the windswept shores of Long Island, a dark secret slept beneath the sand. For more than a decade, the remains of young women, escorts, mothers, daughters were unearthed near Gilgo Beach, their lives silenced and their stories buried. The community was haunted by whispers of a calculating predator, someone who blended into suburban life while carrying out unimaginable acts of violence. Investigators pieced together a chilling puzzle: burner phones, burlap wrappings, and digital trails leading back to an unsuspecting home. The suspect, once seen as ordinary, was anything but. In court, prosecutors describe a monster hiding in plain sight. Neighbors recall a man who waved, smiled, and kept his secrets buried deep. As the trial looms, another one of the unsolved cases has resulted in an arrest. But this time, it's not the accused serial killer. It's a second alleged killer linked to Gilgo Beach. This is a huge, major twist in all of this. Don't forget how all this started. It was a search for a woman named Shannon Gilbert. They start looking for her, and they start finding body after body after body after body, and everybody knew we had a serial killer. But now we're talking about a second suspect? Let's bring in Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas. Okay, this suspect connected to Peaches, recently identified, and Peaches' child, daughter, young daughter. So how does what we know about Peaches and her remains compare to the other victims in this case who've been linked to the serial killer, right? So the remains of the serial killer's alleged victims versus Peaches, the alleged victim of this second suspect.
Well, yeah, Vinny, there are a handful of similarities and differences linked between Peaches, whose real name is Tanya Jackson, and the other 7 victims that Rex Heuermann is currently charged with. One of those differences being the fact that there has been this separate arrest. But Vinny, let's first take a listen to detectives discussing how Jackson was found and how her 2-year-old daughter's remains were linked to her years later.
The first victim is an African-American female. She was located over 27 years ago. On June 28, 1997, her torso was found in the Hempstead Lake State Park, which is located within Lake Mead, New York. This victim had the tattoo you see up on the screen on her chest. It's a heart-shaped peach with a bite out of it with a drop coming from it. Based on this tattoo, the victim has commonly referred to as Peaches. The second victim was Baby Doe. Baby Doe was the second victim discovered just over 14 years ago, on April 11th, 2011. She was found near Ocean Parkway in Babylon, New York, and has been included with the Gilgo Beach murders. This victim was a toddler. She was believed to be 2 years old at the time. She's been referred again as Baby Doe. In 2015, the victims were linked. Through DNA analysis, Peaches was identified as the mother for Baby Doe. Although we linked them together as mother and daughter, we still did not know their identities. In 2020, the FBI assisted us, and the DNA was turned over to their team. They began their investigative genetic genealogy studies, which would eventually lead to the identifications of these victims. Agents and detectives subsequently interviewed family members and obtained DNA samples to confirm the identities through our Nassau County crime lab. As a result of this technology, the interviews, the further DNA testing and analysis, we can now provide the names to both victims. Tanya is Tanya Denise Jackson. Tanya was born on October 22nd, 1970 in Alabama. When she was found in 1997, Tanya was 26 years old and a single mother. She was a U.S. Army veteran, as you see her in her fatigues. She was living in Brooklyn, New York. And at the time, she drove a 1991 Geostorm colored black. This is her daughter, Tatiana Marie Dykes. Tatiana Marie Dykes was born March 17, 1995 in Texas. She's a 2-year-old female, and again, the body was discovered on Ocean Parkway in Babylon. Again, in 2015, she was linked to her mother through DNA analysis.
So, Vinnie, just a quick recap there. Tanya Jackson, a U.S. Army veteran, 26 years old, single mother, found dismembered in 1997. Also had that beautiful little 2-year-old daughter that we see on the right of the screen there, whose remains were found not far from hers on Gilgo Beach. But, Vinnie, what I want to do now is take a look at this map here, showing the location of Jackson's remains and her daughter's remains compared to Heuermann's victims. Now, this map, just to note, only shows 6 of Heuermann's 7 victims, and that's because victim Sandra Castillo was found in North Sea, Southampton. But this map, of course, shows, as you see it there, the locations of Melissa Barthelemy, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Amber Costello, Megan Waterman, Jessica Taylor, and Valerie Mack. Now, Andrew Dykes, that is the man who's now been charged in Tanya Jackson's murder. We see that Tanya Jackson's remains are located farther west. If you look towards the left of your screen, kind of left towards the bottom there, that's where her remains are compared to Heuermann's group that are all kind of there in the same vicinity, marked in red there. But Tatiana Jackson, baby doe, is located near Valerie Mack's remains towards the top right of the screen there. So, Vinnie, let's dive into some similarities here between the two groups of victims. Now, we'll go to similarities first. Heuermann's alleged time frame, documented by investigators and by, based on the victims, is from 1993 to 2011. Tanya Jackson is found in 1997, so that fits that time frame. Heuermann's alleged dumping spot, of course, we know as Gilgo Beach. Tanya Jackson and baby doe Tatiana Jackson are also found there, so that's along his MO as well. Lastly, Heuermann's alleged age range of the victims that he is currently charged with ranged from age 20 to 28. Tanya Jackson was 26, so she fits that as well. Now, some of the differences here. Heuermann's alleged victims were all sex workers or escorts. Now, we just heard there, Tanya Jackson was an Army veteran and was believed to be a medical assistant once she was in Brooklyn. Now, another difference here, Vinnie, Heuermann's alleged victims, out of Heuermann's alleged 7 victims, only 2 were found dismembered. Now, that's Valerie Mack and Jessica Taylor. Now, although Tanya Jackson, her remains were also found dismembered, she clearly differs from the majority of Heuermann's group of victims there. So those are some similarities and differences here, Vinnie. Some match Heuermann's MO. We have to see how this develops now with this new arrest.
But I just want to clarify one thing here. Valerie Mack is the one who is found close to Tatiana, and Valerie Mack is one of the bodies that was dismembered.
That's absolutely right. Found in close vicinity to Tatiana, just a few miles down the beach away from Tanya Jackson. But yeah, Tanya Jackson was found dismembered. Valerie Mack also found dismembered near Tatiana.
Okay. Cody's going to stick around this whole hour. We need a lot of help going through all this new information. Brings us to the first question in our investigation. Why do police believe the accused serial killer didn't commit these murders? And we're talking about the murders of Tanya and Tatiana, mother and daughter. Why do they not believe that the serial killer that they've linked to 6 other bodies in that area, not connected to these 2? Joining me, retired FBI special agent and an expert in executing searches, Bobby Chacon is with us, along with private investigator Erica Morse. Thank you both for being here. Bobby, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts here on why investigators don't believe this is another victim of the accused serial killer?
Well, I think there's significant differences. The chart that Cody laid out on where the remains were found, actually Tanya's remains were found. Only some of her remains were found on that barrier island where the rest of the body was found. Her torso was found much further up north on Long Island, on the body of Long Island, up in Hempstead Lake State Park. I was born in Hempstead General Hospital. I know that area. Her torso was found there. you know, in 1997. Then in 2011 is when the baby and the rest of her remains are found on the barrier island, right? So there you see where that's only some of Tanya's remains were found there. Her torso in 1997 was found in a different area, actually much further away. So there are significant differences. My question is, you know, the way you frame the question, I think, is in reverse. It's why should police believe Heuermann is connected to these murders? Because remember, obviously, the cornerstone of our system is the presumption of innocence. So he's innocent of all of these crimes until we include him in. So the question the more question would be, as an investigator, would be why we believe he did do this. So there are significant differences, as Corey pointed out. You know, she wasn't a sex worker. The person that was arrested is the baby's father. You know this. He has Dykes as the last name. The baby's last name is Dykes. So he had a connection to this victim. This was probably intimate partner homicide, which is a very common thing these days, unfortunately. And so it's a more common crime than a serial killer crime. So I think there's enough to differentiate this particular case, other than the fact on where the bodies were found.
Erica Morse, what are your thoughts here?
My thoughts, Vinnie, are similar to Bobby's and then a couple differences. For me, this is just a domestic. I really feel like Andrew Dykes, this was a domestic situation. You know, we have a very small percentage of Black serial killers. And so Rex Heuermann definitely fits more of that profile. Unless investigators are going to tell me that they're looking at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, in Tennessee, in San Antonio, and the other military bases where Andrew Dykes had lived over the last few decades, then I would be much more inclined to think that this is a domestic situation. Now, about that question, whereas Bobby said it in reverse, I'm going to look at it an even different way, which for me is, why does law enforcement think Rex Heuermann might be innocent at all? And I hate this, Vinnie. This is the part I hate, because I'm not someone who normally defends an accused killer. I've done it once before, and I learned way too much about that process. My bigger issue right now is that they have not cleared everybody who should be cleared. Shannon Gilbert is a huge factor for me in this case. Police corruption is a huge problem for me in this case. Obstruction of justice, missing evidence. All of these factors for me lead me to think that the FBI being kicked out of this case signifies a much bigger police corruption issue, and that Rex Heuermann may not have done this at all. I'm not saying he's innocent. I'm saying I'm seeing a lot that indicates a third-party culpability. And in New York State, that's allowed as a defense.
Bobby, I wanted to get your response to some of the things that Erica has sort of laid out there in this case.
Yeah, I think this case is kind of unique in that way because, you know, as Erica pointed out, we did have this kind of corruption angle early on when the task force was originally formed back in 2011 when the bodies were found, things like that. And so it was a real mess. You know, the police chief that was in charge of it, you know, wound up going to jail. It was really checkered past. And so, but I think they've overcome all that when they reinstituted the task force many years later, and brought in new people and new eyes on it, brought in the FBI back into the case. And I think the renewal of that task force in the later years that led to this arrest, I think kind of washes away all of that doubt that people may have had on the earlier process, because they're really two different investigations. That task force in the beginning was a mess. The leadership was a mess. Right to the top, and so I understand the tainted part of that. But I think that when new blood was brought in, a new chief kind of reconstituted that task force, and then we saw all the progress that the case made. I think that kind of puts me at ease about what happened early on with that, all the corruption that was involved in that early part of that first task force that was put together.
Yeah, once that initial chief was out of the way and it was taken over by a different group, and they solved it pretty quickly. Like everything moved quickly. It was like the evidence was potentially there the whole time, but they did nothing about it because of the issues they were dealing with. Erica, do you feel like there's just more to this story, that even if the accused killer is part of it, do you feel like there might be more to all of this?
I think there is much more to this story. You know, as I've said many times here, Vinny, as an investigator, my job is to rule someone in or rule someone out. And there was another individual that was questioned in this case who had serious ties to law enforcement and had the ability to manipulate some evidence in this and had the technical training to do this dismemberment. And this individual has never officially been ruled out of this case. He just kind of went away and actually went away, like left the area, as opposed to Rex Heuermann, who stayed in the area. Now, I'm not saying that he's innocent. My biggest problems with Rex Heuermann, because I noted them, are the hundreds of searches on the computer specific to the case, and the blueprint document. I have a real problem with that blueprint document. The mitochondrial DNA, not so much, because this third party, whom I won't name, would have actually had the technical knowledge, know-how to plant some hairs that would only match on a mitochondrial level. I've learned a lot since I've worked the inside of a trial. I've seen everything from media manipulation to evidence manipulation to how the narrative can be skewed in such a way that the public is not getting the real story. Yeah. And I don't think Andrew Dykes is as much of an issue here as someone else.
Yeah, we need cameras in the courtroom. We need transparency in this case, too. All right.
Bingo.
Guests are sticking around. Coming up next, will this new twist hurt the prosecution of the Long Island serial killer?
Everybody is presumed innocent in our country. There's a presumption of innocence.
The disappearance of mother Anna Walsh.
Her husband now charged with her murder.
All eyes on this accused killer.
Mr. Walsh was suspecting his wife of having an affair.
The massive trail of evidence.
This incredible timeline of Google searches.
It shows everything that was in his mind.
He searched how long before a body starts to smell.
The disappearance of Anna Walsh murder trial. Live coverage weekday mornings, 8, 7 Central on Court TV.
My office filed a superseding indictment charging the defendant Heuermann with a 7th charged murder in the 2nd degree for the murder of Valerie Mack, which occurred in 2000.
Okay, so the arrest and the charging of murder after murder after murder connected to the accused serial killer was, you almost expected each time another body was connected to him, right? Because, okay, all these bodies, this is no coincidence. But now we've got a situation where there's someone else who's been implicated in 2 of the bodies that are part of this scene in this investigation, and that was not expected in all of this. Let's go back to Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas. So what's the status right now of the case against the accused Long Island serial killer?
Well, Vinny, there has been a handful of legal battles since Rex Heuermann's arrest in the summer of 2023, but things are continuing to move forward. Now, the most recent developments as of September of 2025, a judge has ruled that Heuermann will undergo one single trial for all 7 victims at the same time. Now, his defense had initially sought to break the cases up into separate trials, but of course the judge sided with the prosecution in this one. Now, a judge also ruled that novel DNA technology will be admissible during the trial. Now, this technology is called whole genome sequencing, and prosecutors argued that it's widely accepted and it helps extract evidence that would otherwise be impossible to get, like the rootless hairs that were found on Heuermann's victims. Now, his defense tried to fight this and argue that the tech is largely unproven, but again, the judge sided with the prosecution. And Vinny, one of the most important notes here is that as of now, there is still no trial date set, and Heuermann is due back in court in January of 2026.
Yeah, continues to linger. Now, have the accused killer's attorneys said anything about this latest arrest of this second defendant connected to two of the other bodies?
Well, Vinny, surprisingly enough, they have made no comments at all since this arrest. But of course, we do know they are still standing by Heuermann's innocence. Take a listen to his attorney, Michael J. Brown, reiterate this sentiment following a previous hearing that Heuermann had. Take a listen.
It's extremely circumstantial in nature. In terms of speaking to my client, the only thing I can tell you that he did say as he was in tears was, "I didn't do this." We obviously don't have any evidence. This is the beginning of the case. Everybody is presumed innocent in our country. There's a presumption of innocence, and we're looking forward to fighting this case in a court of law.
So, Vinny, of course, that was following a hearing right when this whole thing got underway a couple of years ago. But they are still standing by his innocence. And, Vinny, although we still don't have a specific trial date, it is still believed that this trial will take place at some point in the year 2026.
All right. Thanks so much, Cody. And that brings us to the next question in our investigation, which is all about the latest developments here with this arrest. Will this, meaning this arrest of a second suspect, hurt the prosecution of the accused Long Island serial killer? Still with me, retired FBI Special Agent Bobby Chacon, who is also an attorney, and also joining me, criminal defense attorney, represents the family of one of the victims, Shannon Gilbert. John Ray is with us as well. John, let me begin with you. Do you think this latest twist impacts and harms the prosecution of the accused serial killer?
Very likely it does harm the prosecution. And that's complicated even more by the finding of Castilla, the girl that was originally the police openly spoke about as having been murdered by John Bitroff, who was convicted of murdering two other sex workers and dumping them in Suffolk County. But for years they were just saying, well, you know, they just didn't have enough evidence to nail him yet. But it turned out they were completely wrong. And it was Heuermann's hairs that were found, or at least his first wife's hairs, I believe, and perhaps his, I think, were found on Castilla. So, and now he's charged. So this is 2 out of 2. And I've said right from the beginning in this case, I've been in since 2011, that there are multiple killers in this, and that there could even be group killings. One of the things you need to keep in mind is that all of these people, including Mr. Dykes, have all people involved in this case, not all, but most, are involved in medical technology. They're in the same field. This fellow Dykes was, he was very highly skilled, apparently, 20-some-odd years in the U.S. Army as a medical technologist, as basically a PA, and also trained for combat. And so he had the ability to repair wounds in combat. So he had the ability to commit the chopping up of his wife or his girlfriend. And he's one medical technologist. Another one is Asa Ellerup, who I've said from the beginning should be a suspect. She had a medical technology in Long Island Jewish. She was a certified registered nurse, and she worked there. Peter Hackett, who we have sued as being involved in the disappearance and ultimately what we say is the murder of Shannon Gilbert. He was the police surgeon of Suffolk County, and he maintained surgeon tools in his home. I took his testimony to that effect. I have a feeling that's who Erica was referring to, but he is a medical technologist. His wife, likewise, was in the medical field of hospice care. And so if you look, I mean, all these people are in the same field. And here we find these bodies in the same places with the same kinds of inflictions of horror. And then put where they are. Think about this guy. Why is Dykes dismember his wife? And you'll notice they didn't bury these body parts or put them in a garbage disposal place or anything like that, or dump them upstate in a mountain. They put them where both Heuermann and this guy Dykes put these bodies all in, basically in an area that people are used for recreation. Hunters use, duck hunters, including Heuermann, who was a duck hunter. in an area where they could be discovered, and they weren't buried. None of them were buried. So there's something common in all these killings. Then ask yourself, why does this fellow Dykes he's charged with the murder of his girlfriend, wife, I'm not sure which she is, but not with the murder of his child.
Of Tatiana, that's correct. That is a big deal. It hasn't happened yet. Before we run out of time in this segment, Bobby Chacon, your thoughts. Does this new...
Bobby's from the same hospital.
There you go.
Where Peter Hackett and his father where Peter Hackett had his leg amputated at Hempstead General Hospital. Bobby, you were born there, right?
That is correct.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, that's fine, John. Bobby, what are your thoughts here? Does this harm the prosecution, this new twist?
I mean, I think the defense will try to make something of it if they're allowed to introduce some of that. But I don't think it will harm it. I think, remember, even though all of these cases can be tried together, each homicide must stand on its own. They must prove beyond a reasonable doubt to the jury each and every single homicide that he's charged with. And I think that the defense will try to bring this up and muddy the waters, as they usually do, and it's quite frankly their job to do. But I don't think the jury will be swayed too much by this. Particularly what hurts the defense in doing that is Dykes' relationship to these victims. And so, you know, it's much easier to see that this could have been either, like Erica said, a domestic violence, or I call it an intimate partner homicide. So I think that it could have been much more reasonable to assume that that took place. They are obviously charged Dykes with this murder, so they have more than what we know. They have enough that they think they can prove he killed these two beyond a reasonable doubt, or at least the adult female beyond a reasonable doubt, or they wouldn't have filed charges. So we're not privy to more of that. They may have had a history of domestic violence in this relationship. We don't know, but we do know that they have more than they've told the public. And so they filed those charges with the confidence that they have enough to obtain a conviction.
All right, Bobby Chacon, always great to have you on the program. Always connected to all the locations in every story we cover. It's unbelievable. John Ray's going to stick around. Still to come, did Andrew Dykes have a motive for the murders? I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the accused Gilgo Beach, Long Island serial killer and the arrest of a second suspect connected to two of the bodies. Here's the story. Shannon Gilbert's frantic 911 call still echoes through the fog of Gilgo Beach, a terrified young woman running barefoot through the dark, pleading for help before vanishing into the marsh. Her disappearance in 2010 would expose a far deeper horror lurking along the Long Island coast. As police searched for Shannon, they unearthed the remains of other women, each with a hauntingly similar story, each discarded near the same desolate stretch of sand. The result was the arrest of a father who is now an accused serial killer. He denies the charges, and now a new twist in the Gilgo case. A second alleged killer has been arrested, connected to two of the victims. Will this shake up the investigation and the upcoming trials? What a twist. What a twist in all of this. Let's bring back in Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas. Okay, let's talk about this new suspect connected to Peaches, Tanya Jackson. What do we know about this guy?
Well, Vinny, there isn't much information out on this man currently, but of course we do know his name is Andrew Dykes. Now, he's only 66 years old, and he was taken into custody near Tampa, Florida for the murders, of course, of Tanya Jackson and her 2-year-old daughter. Here's the kicker, Vinny, that he is the father of. Now, Dykes' son, 43-year-old, another son he had named Andre Dykes, spoke to local outlet Newsday following his dad's arrest. Newsday says, quote, Andre Dykes of Orlando, Florida, told Newsday his father, Andrew, is a loving dad and retired Army veteran and Tennessee state trooper. None of it makes sense, Dykes said of his father's arrest. He's a teddy bear, my dad. It's just not possible. I can't even imagine something like this being done by him. Dykes said his father denies any involvement in the killings and is holding out hope he will ultimately be acquitted. The whole narrative that my dad was trying to, or he killed her to keep it from my mother, is not true because my mother obviously knew, Dykes said. The military knew. Now, Vinnie, also according to this reporting from Newsday, Andrew Dykes' son says Dykes' wife knew he'd had the baby Tatiana with another woman and that he had had another daughter with another woman, meaning that he had 2 affairs in the late 90s. Now, the 43-year-old son, Andre, says his 2 parents, Dykes and his former wife, separated several years ago.
So there's another, okay, that's huge, right? So there's another woman that he was with, who he fathered a child with, and that woman and that child both alive, correct?
Correct. That's absolutely right. So he had a wife, Tanya Jackson, Tatiana Jackson, who are deceased, but he also had another woman, and that woman and that child are still alive, yes.
All right. Thanks so much, Cody. Interesting. It brings us to the next question in our investigation. It's about the new suspect. Did Andrew Dykes have a motive for the murders? Was there a motive there? Still with us, private investigator Erica Morse and the criminal defense attorney who represents the family of one of the victims, Shannon Gilbert. John Ray with us as well. Erica, what are your thoughts here about motive and who this guy is? Was there a motive for him to kill Tanya and Tatiana?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I mean, in terms of what Bobby said, the intimate partner violence, it could be anything from a child support or I'm going to go to your wife. It's a domestic.
Well, we're here, Erica. The only reason I'm saying it is that his son is saying, listen, Mom knew about this woman. He knew about another woman that he had a child with. That woman and her child are alive. Why would this woman and this child be killed? So that's kind of the crux of it. You think it could just be, go ahead, continue.
An argument.
To answer.
It could be an argument. It could be an argument. It could be a threat to expose. It could be, I'm mad right now, okay? Let me just go here. I'm mad because there were 2 pieces I didn't know that I've since learned since we got on the air. And that is that Andrew Dykes had medical training and that he's a retired cop. Now I'm really mad. Because John hit on this group killings thing, and I think he's onto something. John, I admire your work so much, especially in this case. But I have to say this. I have a friend who has worked on this case extensively, a colleague, and she is convinced that there's a medical angle to this case and that somebody needs to investigate an organ harvesting angle to it. And we've talked extensively about it over the last couple days. I see John nodding his head over there. Now that I know that Andrew Dykes has the medical technology, the medical training, he's a retired cop. Now, like what I thought 15 minutes ago has already evolved. And that's my job as an investigator, is to look at the information and follow it where it goes.
John, what are your thoughts here? Did Dykes have a motive for these murders?
Every murderer does. They may not be rational, but they're motives. And in this case, you have to look at the evidence first that you do know. And that is that this woman is dismembered and put in 2 different places. She's put in a tub, a plastic tub, her torso, in a place where anybody could find her in Hempstead Lake State Park. Her other body parts, absent her head, are put along Ocean Parkway. Why would this guy who came from Texas know that this is a dumping ground place where you put these bodies? And why would he leave his wife 7 or 8 miles away, his remains of his wife, from the baby, which was put right next to, virtually next to Valerie Mack, one of the other dismembered persons in this case? The answer I'm suggesting is that what you see in common as a motive is that this is some kind of a cultish thing, to my mind. Something's going on where these people are all involved in something that's wrong. Listen, if he's killing his wife because he's jealous or something's found out about him or some such other thing as that, why would he cut her up, leave her in 2 different places like that, and then leave the baby somewhere else? None of that makes any rational sense unless you consider the background of some of these people and what they're really involved in. And I take you back to looking at some of the for example, the images that we know that Åsa Ellerup and her daughter were looking at, horrible chopping up of women's bodies and dismemberments, disembowelments of them, and the like. There's something that connects them all, and it's that kind of perverse, twisted murder that seems they all seem to have some in some way a connection with. So, I mean, to my mind, those are the connectors. That could be the motive, and indeed, it could be a harvesting thing as well. But you know, there's money in that, and a lot of money actually. So it could very well be that as well. I tried a case on that very issue, so I have some knowledge of it, and the harvesters, many of them are truly, you know, they're buzzards that fly in and take the bodies before they're dead and take harvest their organs. So that's possible. But the simple motive that he killed her because of some jealousy or some, you know, marital struggle, nah, I don't see it.
That doesn't add up for you. A big thanks, Erica Morse and John Ray, for joining us tonight. Interesting concept, interesting questions being raised tonight. But as we know, as we sit here right now, just one person has been charged as the serial killer in all this. Thanks so much. Coming up next, what role will DNA play in the prosecution of Andrew Dykes?
The disappearance of mother Anna Walsh.
Her husband now charged with her murder.
All eyes on this accused killer.
Mr. Walsh was suspecting his wife of having an affair.
The massive trail of evidence.
This incredible timeline of Google searches.
It shows everything that was in his mind.
He searched how long before a body starts to smell.
The disappearance of Anna Walsh murder trial. Live coverage weekday mornings, 8, 7 Central on Court TV.
There was an abandonment sample obtained from the defendant via the pizza box, and the pizza that was in the pizza box, a DNA profile was obtained from that pizza. Subsequent to the defendant's arrest, a buccal swab was taken of the defendant. A DNA profile was obtained from that buccal swab, and the buccal swab of the defendant matches the DNA profile from that of the abandonment sample in the pizza box.
And that's why you always eat the crust of the pizza. Unbelievable, right? It was a pizza. That's how they got that final piece to connect the suspect in the Long Island serial killer case. But now there's a new twist, and there's a second suspect for 2 other bodies. Let's bring back in Cody Thomas. Cody, how did they track down this suspect, Andrew Dykes?
Well, Vinny, Andrew Dykes didn't come on the radar until baby Doe, the 2-year-old Tatiana Dykes, was identified. Now, they traced Tatiana's birth records back to Texas, where she was born. That's where they found Andrew Dykes labeled as the father on the birth certificate. Now, Dykes' son, 43-year-old Andrew Dykes, said he was contacted the day after his father's arrest, and he told the local outlet Newsday, quote, "The detective said there was DNA at the scene and that he was 100% certain that my dad committed the murders," the son said. Now, Vinny, according to Newsday, Andrew Dykes says that he believes investigators are just throwing something at the wall to see what sticks. But also, according to that reporting, it says that Andrew Dykes does not have an attorney just yet, but I'm sure that will change here in the near future.
All right, Cody Thomas, great reporting tonight. Appreciate it. That brings us to the final question in our investigation this hour, which is, what role will DNA play in the prosecution of Andrew Dykes? Is this another DNA case? We have 2 forensic DNA experts joining me tonight, Susanna Ryan and Angela Ross with Independent DNA Consulting. Thank you both for being here. Susanna, I'll begin with you. What are your thoughts about the role of DNA in the prosecution of this second suspect?
I think it's going to depend on the relationship that these 2 individuals had at the time. And what I mean by that is, were they still boyfriend and girlfriend? Was there some sort of contact between them that we would expect to see DNA from Andrew Dykes on Tanya's body? So I think that that's one of the key factors. If they did not have a relationship at the time of her death in 1997, then it's more difficult to explain his DNA, let's say, on her body or under her fingernails or something like that. Now, on the other hand, if you have DNA at the crime scene, what I would be looking at is that Rubbermaid tote that she was her torso was discovered in. I'd be looking at the handles of that. Who carried that Rubbermaid tote? Who touched that? That might be more compelling information DNA-wise than, for example, a sexual assault swab that had his DNA present.
Yeah, and Angela, you look at this case, the DNA, it took a while, but they used the genealogy, and they were able to first figure out that the child and Peaches, Tanya, were related. Then they had to get their identity. Then they find out who the father is. What are your thoughts about how all of that sort of plays out? And are any of those pieces things that can be challenged? Is it easier to challenge DNA evidence in a case if the suspect is related by blood to one of the victims?
Well, like Susanna was saying, it just really depends on their relationship at the time. So we know that if somebody is cohabitating or if they're still married, boyfriend, girlfriend, frequently being around each other, then we would expect their DNA to be on their body, like she said, under their fingernails or anywhere else on their body, even on their neck or even a sexual swab. So a lot's going to depend on what was their relationship at the time. And I think, Susanna hit on that really well as far as that's, even though we matched them up as knowing that, that this was the child, they were able to match that up years later. And then we figured out who the father was, that's great. But if they didn't have any contact for 2 years, 1 year, or however long it was, then finding his DNA on his body, or like Susanna said, even on that tote, could be extremely significant in breaking the case open.
Susanna, something else that happens in every trial I cover, right? There's these battle of experts and different interpretations of evidence. Is there any way that Andrew Dykes' daughter, Tatiana, her DNA that is found maybe on the tote, maybe on her mom, could be confused with his DNA because they're related by blood? If that's his daughter, could his daughter's DNA, if it's a partial sample, could it be confused with his DNA?
I would say no, and the main reason being that she's a female and he's a male. So we're going to have, we can tell based upon the DNA whether we're dealing with a male or a female sample. In addition, the only way you could have some confusion in that matter is if you had all three individuals' DNA present, if you had Andrew and Tanya's DNA. Now their DNA is going to make up perfectly Tatiana's DNA. So there you can have some confusion, or if there's a mixture. But in this case, no. If you had Tatiana's DNA, that would be a unique DNA profile. Yes, she would share half of her DNA with her mother and half with her father. But what would differentiate that would be that locus or location that we look at that is specific to males or females. And we would not see that male chromosome present.
All right, we're out of time for tonight, but obviously we're going to continue covering this story and others, and would love to have both of you back. Thank you so much. Great information, great insight, great experts. All right, this arrest is huge for investigators and for the victim, Tanya Peaches Jackson. But it's also huge for the accused Long Island serial killer. That's because he's just been handed a chance for a reasonable doubt, something to show the jury, someone to point the finger out. Will it work? Well, it may depend upon what the judge allows the jury to actually hear. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.